The morning was just beginning, and the first light of the sun's rays gently illuminated the world, filling it with warmth. A calm, invigorating tranquility spread everywhere, and the morning dew covering the leaves. And the grass shone like countless jewels. This morning, the maids were doing their usual chores, but today, surprisingly, there was more laundry than usual, and the maids were incredibly exhausted from washing and ironing. Once all the laundry was hung out, two of them decided to lie down and rest so as not to return to the palace, where they would be burdened with work again. But the maids' rest was short-lived, because nearby they heard the noise of an approaching carriage. They saw the princess getting out of the carriage, and each of them thought, "It's probably good that your father is an emperor, because you can wear whatever dress you want." The two maids were sure that this is what a truly happy life should be like. One of the maids was indignant because it was incredibly uncomfortable to walk in such a dress. Because under the dress, she had a very tight corset, and this girl could barely breathe. And in this state, it's not even easy to put a fork in your mouth, let alone walk. But on top of everything, with so much pain, the girl still has to put on a happy face and smile. The maids laughed at their friend and asked her how she could know what it was like to be a princess. But one of these maids was actually such a princess, and her parents were the true king and queen. She was born in a small kingdom, and her name is Siana Asilind von Sillet. This little one thought she would grow up loved and happy like any other princess. But her mother died when the girl was only 10 years old. The father immediately brought a new unknown woman to his house, who settled in with them from day one. Although the girl felt lonely, she missed her mother very much every day. Her strength was consumed by suffering, but she still tried to fulfill her duty to her family. But under the guise of education, constant bullying and beatings awaited her from her new stepmother, who now lived with her. This lady was constantly dissatisfied with the girl's behavior and punished even an incorrect greeting with whips and beatings. But this was normal education for a princess, and Siana believed she had to endure it all. One day, the stepmother behaved excessively rudely, and her words even frightened the girl. She called her a stupid and uneducated lady who doesn't even understand the most basic things. One night she shouted at her. Supposedly, the girl was to blame for everything and was very difficult to teach, and after these words, she gestured with her hand to the baby. Her father saw this cruel scene, and the girl really hoped he could help her. But the little one was deeply mistaken, and the father was sure that the lady was doing everything right. And the mother had to raise a disobedient child. The baby understood that it was not her fault at all, and she just wanted to be happy, and tried her best to be a princess worthy of her family. But all her dreams and expectations were instantly destroyed, and at that moment, she decided that it would be best to just disappear and forget forever what happened to her in this family. This is what the protagonist thought, but she did not expect that this is exactly what would happen. When she turned 18, the imperial troops stormed the palace in broad daylight, and the kingdom fell into the hands of the invaders. The invaders were led by the crown prince of the Levedon Empire, Rachid Levedon of Adren. That day, the young man said that they did not deign to answer his letter, so he decided to come in person. And he invited everyone to surrender. Siana was sure that if they surrendered, he might really forgive them, and she offered this scenario to her father. But the father declared that under no circumstances would he bow his head to the enemy, much less allow anyone to surrender. And having done this, he probably considered himself a hero because he did not bow his head to the conqueror, but to the young man, whose nickname was Rashid the Bloody. He had no intention of forgiving the enemy. Siana's life was not so happy, but she never wanted it to end like this. So the girl fell to her knees in front of the young man, cried, and said she was willing to do anything for him to let her live. The young master asked her if she was ready to become his concubine, but she was sure that she had absolutely no charm and did not differ in appearance. And she was sure that she would not give His Majesty any pleasure or joy. However, the lady said that she enjoys excellent health. She embroiders very well and knows how to cook wonderfully for you. Therefore, the girl asked the young man to make her his maid so she could serve him. Sayana did not intend to make such a proposal, but in such a situation, she was ready to say these words. He asked the girl to raise her head because he would very much like to see her face. When Sayana raised her head, she saw in front of her a very handsome young man who was said to be an unparalleled master swordsman. One could even assume that he preserved his victories only because the enemy could not stop looking at his face. The young man looked at the girl and joked that she had a round and pale face, but he agreed to make her his maid. He asked his knight to untie her hands, and in a few seconds she was free from the shackles. The torments of hell had just passed through her, but she remained alive. And she said her name was Siana Asiland von Sillet. She was grateful to the young master and promised never to forget his kindness. So she became a junior maid in the imperial palace and could have completely despaired, considering that her position was a disaster. But now she bakes bread with her own hands, washes dirty clothes, and maintains order and beauty in the blooming garden. This is a completely different world from the princess's world, where she was suffocated by tight corsets, and she had to constantly maintain a doll's smile on her lips. And the work of a maid was now 100 times more pleasant and safe for her. And Siana was sure that she was ready and would like to live like this until old age. While running one of her errands, another maid approached her and told her that Siana was again doing something she hadn't been asked to do. This maid was a girl named Jan, who believed that Siana was eager to impress the older maids. And she was definitely an upstart who didn't know her place. She considered her a slave, taken from a defeated royal family who would never be named head maid. But at that moment, another woman approached her and asked Zana to stop and not interfere with everyone's work here. And if this continues, she promised to complain to the older maids. Zana insisted that she hadn't offended anyone, but only gave the girl wise advice. And balanced, but for the former princess, who had been bullied by her stepmother for years. This harassment seemed like nothing more than a cute joke. Zana was the daughter of a rich merchant famous throughout the empire, so it would not be surprising if she got the position of head maid without any effort at all. The other lady was named Yuju, and she, like Siana, was a young maid. She was an unusually tall and strong lady who had good rudiments for being a maid. And Yushu was sure that Siana was a foreigner, and if she was accepted as a junior maid, then she would have someone to turn to for help. But the lady understood that the crown prince had granted her this status and appointed the heiress of the defeated royal dynasty as a maid in his palace. Perhaps because she, forgetting royal pride, fell and begged for mercy. Perhaps it was mercy, perhaps the crown prince simply thought it was fun. And most likely, momentary sympathy means absolutely nothing. Therefore, Siana confidently stated that she had no sponsor and had absolutely no one to turn to if something happened. Rashid asked Saul, his aide, how this girl who was recently appointed maid was doing. Crown Prince Rashid sat in his office and dealt with important work matters. The young man said that if Anna successfully handles all tasks, they say she is a bit clumsy because she is not yet used to work. But she is honest, intelligent, and learns very quickly. But she is still far from getting a promotion because the girl lacks the necessary skills. The crown prince seemed to feel guilty about invading her country and exterminating her family. But he was especially sure that he simply could not let the little person go. Innocent and big-eyed. In fact, the so-called bloody Prince Rashid was not at all what he seemed. And he was surrounded by some very unusual furry friends. This cruel and handsome man loved several animals very much, but absolutely no one knew it. Rashid was sure that this girl would definitely learn the maid's trade. And she would try. Saul stated that the girl's skills had not yet been tested and that she should not be appointed maid. Rashid suggested in this case to see if this girl could become a very good maid. Every day during lunch, Siana was happy that they were no longer trying to control her regarding food, so that she wouldn't lose her sophistication, because the maids didn't even need to think about such things. Therefore, the girl was very happy that she could finally do what she wanted. At that moment, while Siana was quietly enjoying her meal, Jana walked past her and, seeing how she ate with appetite, loudly declared in front of everyone that the lady had probably arrived hungry and poor, and it's no wonder she liked this the most. Siana didn't care if Jan was trying to offend or not, and her taunts didn't seem horrible to her. Sana wanted to say something to the girl, but at that moment Juju approached them and loudly tapped the table with her fork. She asked Shauna not to interfere with the quiet woman, otherwise there would be consequences. But the envious Shauna was not going to leave the lady alone. The verbal battle between the two maids continued. Isiana for a moment thought she saw a fight between a bear and a hyena in front of her. Reef, the head of cleaning and novice instructor, approached them and asked why the girls were fighting among themselves during working hours. She said she didn't care even if they killed each other and just asked not to cause her trouble. She showed an envelope in her hands and said that the authorities were sending a message to all the maids. In a couple of days, there should be a tea party, and the maids must receive the guests. The service must be impeccable, according to all the rules of etiquette. The ladies really wanted to know who would come for tea, whether it was the wife of some aristocrat or a beautiful foreign princess. The head of cleaning said that these would be the people who grow fruit for the imperial table. The fruits that these peasant women brought were always of excellent quality, so with the joy of their heart and noble work, His Highness ordered them to be rewarded with a tea party at the palace. But Sana was indignant because she was not obliged to serve some peasant women. She invited Shanna to prove herself and, as a real maid, serve these peasants. The next morning, the head maid gathered the maids to explain the tea etiquette to them. Although they were young maids, they still belonged to the palace and did not dare to discredit the honor of the emperor. Yu Yu was very happy when she heard that they would be given a real job, but aspirations and skills did not always correspond to each other. Tea etiquette was very difficult for her, and the tea, which was supposed to flow in a thin stream from the teapot, splashed from the edge of the cup in different directions. Many maids laughed at her, as if she had probably never drunk tea in her life, and did not know the rules of etiquette at all. Zana was the next to serve tea from the teapot, and did not do a bad job at this task. Zana was taught by the best etiquette teacher in the city, and all this cost her father a large bag of gold. Which is why the girl now handled these tasks so easily. She was sure that it was not appropriate for her to remain a student for long, and she should definitely become His Majesty's head chambermaid. When Siana was a princess, she knew that only the best maids were chosen to be His Majesty's maids. For the slightest offense, the queen mercilessly punished any maid who was even slightly guilty. These chambermaids were truly the best in their field. Their manners in domestic service sometimes surpassed even the manners of some noble ladies. So they tried to radiate calm and composure so as not to irritate the queen when serving tea. But compared to them, all these maids serving in the palace were completely incompetent. Siana did not want to stand out from the others, so she ended up with a slightly awkward stream. Because the girl understood that she should definitely be more modest. All the maids rejoiced at the opportunity to learn etiquette. But no one canceled their duties, and after the lesson, they returned to work. Thanks to Yoo-hoo, they finished work very early today, and Siana was delighted with the freshly baked bread the maid brought her. Only one thing was strange. Chachu behaved strangely today and was constantly silent. Joo-hoo lowered her eyes and said sadly that she was very jealous of Siana after today's class. In fact, Juju had always been praised by everyone, but now Siana saw the opposite for the first time. And this was probably her first failure, which plunged the maid into sad thoughts. She said she was ashamed to admit it, but Zana was right, and in fact she never drank tea. The crown prince appointed Siana as a maid, but Juju was the only one who cared about her. And she was a maid like her, so if she could help her with something, she definitely should. Then she invited her friend to teach her tea etiquette, and the next day they started training. Siana said that it is necessary to take enough boiling water to preheat the cups before serving. Then pour a spoonful of tea leaves into the teapot. After adding the tea leaves, wait a little and then start pouring. In fact, in theory, it was not a very complicated process, but it had to be perfected in practice. After much persistent effort, Juju finally began to succeed, and for the first time she saw how a thin stream poured from a teapot. And uniform, as it should be according to the rules of etiquette. Juju was very happy that Siana could teach her something, but without her efforts, nothing would have happened. During the training process, they became best friends, and since then, the relationship between Juju and Siana changed a lot for the better. One pleasant evening, the maids discussed after work which of them got this job. And how. Many of them really wanted to help their family, and that's why they started looking for work as domestic servants. Soon the speech came to Siana, who also had to tell how she got here. Not long ago she was a princess. The girl understood that if she said this right now, she would complicate everything a lot. So she revealed the story of how His Highness, the Crown Prince, appointed her as a maid because the state she lived in no longer exists. The maids asked her if she really meant Crown Prince Rashid, who is completely invincible in battle. Of course, they heard a lot of gossip about him, and Rashid was quite a famous person. All the maids did nothing but discuss how incredibly handsome this young gentleman, with a face that looked carved from marble, was. And Yuhu was dreaming that she really wanted to see this handsome man, so she could see with her own eyes the rumors circulating about him. But despite all his beauty, people said Rashid was a very cruel person. And unfortunately, that was the bitter truth. Siana told the whole truth that the young man killed her entire family, but her relatives offended her and constantly mocked her. The girl did not want to go into detail, so she smiled and said that a long time had passed. And she had almost forgotten everything, so there was no need to worry about her. Shashu asked if the lady was saying that just so she wouldn't feel guilty about her words. Yuhu called her very kind and hugged her, but it was half-truth, and from then on Yuhu's relationship with her became even better. At noon on Siana's workday, she was doing her usual things. But suddenly, she heard Jan's voice nearby. Zana didn't have time to open her mouth when the formidable Yuyu appeared in front of her and declared that the lady shouldn't even try to say anything bad. It was obvious, but Sana was afraid of the strong and sturdy Juju and had no choice but to reply that she only wanted to ask her now. In addition to all the care, Juju constantly brought some delicacies for Siana obtained from the kitchen. Every time Juju saw her friend, she couldn't understand how the crown prince could kill the family of such an innocent girl. She even felt guilty that now, thanks to her, Zuzu hated the crown prince. But she was pleased to see who was always willing to be on her side. Rashid received a letter from Baroness Appleton early this morning. Her cute animals were having breakfast with ripe red apples, and the young man watched them with pleasure. Saul noticed that the apples were from the Appleton family and were undoubtedly the best on the market. Saul still didn't understand why the young man called the farmers to the palace, but he assumed that the essence of Siana's test was hidden in these apples. Rashid smiled and said his companion guessed correctly, and now he would do him the honor and allow him to play with his pets all day. The young man unfolded the invitation just handed to him, and it happened that Baroness Appleton also wished to attend the tea party. The day of the tea party arrived. Since it was necessary not to dishonor the name of the imperial family, the young maids prepared for the tea party in advance. And very carefully, so each of them had a lot to do. Early in the morning, it was necessary to arrange the garden flowers, arrange the white tables according to the number of guests. And so that the table did not look too modest, a vase with freshly cut hydrangeas had to be placed on each table. Among the maids, there was a rumor that not only agricultural workers would attend the tea party, but also the owner of the apple nursery, Baroness Appleton. And now their task was not only to receive commoner guests, but the maids were simply obliged to make a good impression on the Baroness. And the first one who wanted to gain recognition was, of course, Sana. After the news that the Baroness would be among the guests, Yuyu decided that this could also be an opportunity to prove herself and a motivation to improve. Siana said she wasn't worried and believed in her friend, because after all she had a good teacher. But nothing would have happened if the student hadn't tried and made every effort to achieve her goal. When the doors opened and the guests entered, the young maids solemnly greeted them. Lining up in a row, After the greeting, the maids had to seat all the guests in their places. But this time, one of the maids was holding up the line, and Sienna peeked to take a look. It was, of course, Jean, who wanted to serve Baroness Appleton, so she delayed the entire line. It wasn't just about Jan, but also about how all the maids start behaving when they see ladies of honorable status in front of them. It was said of them that the maids of the royal palace were simply magnificent. And they looked like noble ladies, but it was easy to impress ordinary peasant women because they were of low birth. And they were not invested with power. The tea ceremony can only begin when all the guests have arrived. And as a rule, it is at the end that the guest everyone was waiting for arrives. Suddenly, a noble lady stepped out of the carriage, looking graceful and incredibly elegant. Everyone thought that this was probably Baroness Appleton herself. Jean ran towards her as fast as she could and shouted to the maids not to dare approach her. And stay away from the Baroness. She ran to the Baroness, smiled falsely, and asked her to follow her. Sienna was surprised by how impressive this incredible lady looked and how incredibly expensive her perfume smelled. And at that moment, Sienna for a moment envied Sienna for having caught such a beautiful guest for herself. But it turned out that another woman came with the Baroness, but many of the maids considered her ugly. And they refused to serve the poor old woman. The tea ceremony will not begin until the last guest arrives, which means the last guest is this old woman. Since no guest could be left unattended, Sienna approached her, smiled, and asked her to follow her so she could accompany the old woman to her table. Each table was seated by 3 or 4 people and served by one maid. When all the guests are seated, the tea ceremony finally begins. Sienna was surprised. The communication between these ladies was simple and honest, and there was absolutely no gossip. No one washed anyone's bones, and perhaps that's why Sienna felt so comfortable now. After everything she experienced in the kingdom. However, this did not mean that the maids' mistakes would also be tolerated. So they had to do their job conscientiously. Sienna had the role of bringing the main dessert, and it was chocolate made from a very expensive type of cocoa. It was the same dessert served to princesses and queens, and many ladies had heard of it. But none thought they could try it today. Sienna could understand their reaction, since it was the first time they tried real chocolate. Sienna wondered if the older lady sitting at the next table, and whom none of the maids paid attention to anymore, would like it, because everyone was busy receiving the honorable attention of the Baroness. She saw that the woman was dirty with chocolate and politely suggested that she take a napkin to wipe her face and the hands of the sweets. The woman was surprised that she was paid attention to, especially with such an affectionate gesture. The ladies present at the tea party could not convey their admiration for the delicious dessert they had just tasted. Sienna informed all the girls that they were all guests of honor and asked them to enjoy a wonderful tea party. She asked the girls not to be shy and that if they wanted anything they could always ask her. But for now she would serve them tea. Some of the girls sensed the exquisite aroma, while others saw no difference between the tea they drink at home. Sienna said that they say it is necessary to try to understand what the essence of elite tea is. And she pointed out that out of all of them, only one woman can understand such things. Sienna really wanted to take a closer look at the Baroness, but she did not know the venerable lady by sight. Not far from them sat the same majestic lady in a purple corduroy dress, and slowly drinking tea. Sienna understood that Zana must be very careful not to make mistakes if she made a mistake in front of such an important person. The tea party and her status would be ruined. Zana was sure that she was the daughter of a diamond magnate and that she was now in her place, next to such an important person. But the lady suddenly said that she did not want to tolerate her arrogant behavior. And her assessing gaze, not to mention the fact that she served dessert as if she had done her a favor. And she didn't even know how to serve tea correctly. Sana had never heard such an evaluation of herself, so what she heard made her hands tremble. And she became careless. She had always been told how skillful she was, but now Jean heard that she was a useless maid in the imperial palace. The lady said that, they say, a maid who does not fulfill her duties must be severely punished, so that she remembers her lesson. But unexpectedly, Siana defended Jean and asked Madame for forgiveness, while she trembled with fear and could not say a word. Siana replied politely and asked for forgiveness because her skills did not match the Baroness's refined taste, and asked to be lenient with them, although she also said that this tea party was organized by the imperial family. And if the guests were not happy, the owner of the palace might be offended. The lady did not reply to this and continued to look silently ahead, waiting for what the brave girl would dare to say next. She laughed because she really heard a threat from the maid, but Siana said she was just trying to clear up the misunderstanding so that everyone would be happy. The lady got up from the table and replied that if she did not respect her, she would receive the punishment of the real culprit. The woman's words sounded truly threatening, and Siana bowed deeply and replied that she had heard all the warnings. There was always a heavy air in Siana's family due to the tension arising from predators watching their prey. It was a terrible period during which she could not allow the slightest mistake. Therefore, it was a matter of life and death, although it was a very long time ago. But for some reason, it came to the girl's mind now. Now the most important thing was to show her talents and skills in front of the Baroness. So Siana served her Earl Grey tea. The taste of black tea is influenced by the amount and composition, and then by the correct dosage in the absence of scales. It is impossible to accurately weigh how much is put in the teapot, and the tea can turn out bitter or watery. The spoon should not be heaped. It should be poured slowly so that the leaves do not clump together. At the right temperature, it is necessary to start pouring in time to get a tasty drink. And aromatic. Siana knew all the intricacies of brewing tea. First, she had to lift the teapot high so that the stream of tea mixed with the air. This gives a richness of aroma, and the water temperature and the amount of tea were ideal. However, the rest was a matter of taste. No matter how ideal its brewing was and how elite it was, if it doesn't suit a person's taste, they won't like it. Siana stood up humbly and waited for the Baroness to take her first sip. The Baroness thought for a moment and said confidently that this tea was simply magnificent and better than anything she had ever tasted. The first thought that crossed the maid's mind was that she had finally succeeded. She said she was very happy and that the lady liked it, so if she needed anything else she could let her know. But the Baroness only said that now the maid would attend to her. The created tension instantly dissipated, and the rest of the tea party passed without incident. When the ladies were about to leave, Siana approached one of them and apologized because she was supposed to only take care of her. But it turned out that she couldn't help paying attention to that older woman. The girl thanked the maid that they were able to enjoy tea peacefully, and that everything was at the highest level. The last one left was an elderly lady. She was sure that she did not correspond to high society at all, and it was indeed so. But what to think? The woman said that she was afraid to hear many words of contempt directed at her when she arrived at the imperial palace. And she was completely uneasy, but she did not expect something completely different to happen. She dared to go, and there was no mistress left in the carriage. And all thanks to the radiant maid who approached her first. The lady was very happy to have had such a pleasant time, drinking aromatic tea with sweet chocolate and talking with her friends. The woman said she would never forget this happy day and thanked the maid for the pleasant impression. Maids should never show a personal attitude towards guests, and this has been the case since ancient times because a maid must be anonymous and polite. But it was very difficult for Siana to hide her feelings, so she smiled and replied that it was an honor for her to serve such a dear guest at the table. After the tea party, a normal working day began again for the young maids. Early in the morning, they prepared for the tea party and served the guests under the scorching sun. In reality, everything was completely different: irregular working hours, heavy workload, and constant shortage of workers. And as usual, it was already late, there was still a lot of work left, so the maids worked until they were exhausted. Siana approached Hushu and told her that she must have had a hard time at the tea party. She was so worried that she couldn't fulfill her duties, but many of the women wanted to take her to work with them. One lady even suggested that she leave this thankless task and go work for them at the apple orchard. The other maids thanked Shiana for doing a great job today and helping them all. The two maids even asked Shiana to teach them tea ceremony. But until then, they treated her as if she were nothing. Suddenly, their attitude changed, and the only one who was unhappy about this was Zana. She smiled at the maids and said that Shiana was good at serving at a tea party, but that there was no need to immediately invade a foreigner from a conquered kingdom. But these women were sure that during the entire tea party, Jan was quieter than water, lower than the grass, and she didn't know what shame was at all. The tea party almost ended in complete failure because she could not perform the task well in front of the Baroness. And Shiana had to correct her mistakes. And instead of doing it, Shiana is now telling them this, and it will surely result in good manners and understanding their position. Shiana did not want to interfere in their fights, and her thoughts were occupied with the Baroness, who incredibly stood out among the others. Her gestures and gait were incredibly elegant, and there was true dignity in them. And she was probably not just the Baroness everyone knows. The lady stood near the Crown Prince's door, and his aide-de-camp was indignant about the girl's frequent nocturnal appearances that people could misinterpret. But this incredible lady was severe and full of grace, as if she were a real princess. Said the young man, "The Crown Prince only looks normal on the outside, but in reality, he only thinks about soft squirrel paws," and immediately closed his mouth, realizing that he had just said it out loud. But the Baroness smiled and asked him to continue, because she was very curious about this information. She asked Saul to get out of the way, and thought that the young man would beg for forgiveness in tears. Then the lady went to the Crown Prince's office, and what was strange, the animals immediately ran to her. And now it was not entirely clear who this princess was. In fact, Saul knew that the Crown Prince had bought a magic stone, the price of which was equal to the average fortune, all to pretend to be a woman for noon. The magic stone modified the body for 12 hours, so with its help one could transform into anyone. Therefore, in a few minutes, the Baroness turned into Crown Prince Rashid, who was in a hurry to tell Saul about the tea party and his meeting with Shiana. He considered the girl incredibly ideal and was sure that she embodied the heights of etiquette and courtesy, and her grace could not even be hidden under her maid's clothes. Rashid said it was very funny, and that this incident with his magical cross-dressing only convinced him that Shiana was not just a maid. Saul considered Rashid a man of disgusting misanthropy, but at the same time, he had amazing insight. For a moment, Saul wondered if the Crown Prince was even considering bringing this maid here. Rashid said that this intelligent woman passed the test he specially prepared for her. That day, Shiana was busy with her usual maid duties, and the head of the maids approached her with the news of a guest's arrival. She said that Baroness Appleton wanted to speak with Shiana personally and was waiting in the hallway. The tea party seemed to go smoothly, and the lady was puzzled why she had come. She was afraid she might make a mistake, but that was unlikely. Shiana had many thoughts swirling in her head, but she believed that the Baroness was here for a completely different reason. The maid hurried out with the guest and immediately apologized for disturbing her at such an early hour. But Shiana suddenly saw that old woman in front of her, who said that this time they could get to know each other well. The woman introduced herself as Baroness Magdalena Appleton and said that the lady made a very good impression on her. The Baroness respectfully greeted the maid and would like to thank her for the warm welcome she received yesterday. In the end, it turned out that the old woman at the tea party was the real Baroness Appleton. Shiana was surprised. Was that young woman just a trick to observe the true qualities of the maids? The lady asked the lady to sit next to her and give her some of her time to talk. And Shiana thought, indeed, at the tea party that lady never said her name. The maid hurried to apologize since she didn't know who this woman really was. So she asked for forgiveness if she had offended the Baroness that evening. But the lady just laughed and said that she herself had secretly come to the tea party. And that's how it should have been. Therefore, she said confidently that the girl should not worry about this and should not feel guilty in any way. The imperial family was invited to a tea party, and such an opportunity only comes once in a lifetime. But the Baroness did not go out into the world because of her appearance, which she was very ashamed of. She preferred not to appear in public, because she knew the rumors that would spread if she went to the imperial palace. Because Baron Appleton's wife could not look so terrible. The lady was sure that terrible things would be said about her appearance, and with such an unsightly look. And careless, she belonged among the gardeners, so she could not allow this to happen. Seeing this invitation, something stirred in her heart that night, and she decided to secretly attend the tea party at the palace. This opportunity was as attractive as a ripe apple on a tree, and the Baroness decided that if she didn't say who she was, no one would bother her. And even wearing a worn maid's uniform and no makeup on her face, she saw Siana, who was full of grace and dignity. That day, Siana made a great impression on the lady, and she thought how wonderful it would be to be as elegant as her. So from the next day, she sat with her etiquette books and even started trying on new dresses. Therefore, the lady wanted to greet the girl properly. She put her hand to her chest and bowed to the maid. Cyan noted that unfortunately the Baroness did everything wrong, but the most important thing is that she felt incredible warmth from her. Therefore, with this single greeting, she told her more than 1,000 words, and yet she was not one to judge this sweet woman. In fact, she was only treating her with respect, so Siana intended to make sure to reciprocate the same. As a gift, the Baroness brought the girl a basket of apples, and she took it to the other maids. For the hardworking maids, who only ate stale bread, Baroness Appleton, who gave them apples with honey, became nothing less than a goddess. But in this case, it was not clear who this noble lady, who was at the tea party with silver hair, was. And violet eyes, just like the crown prince. Siana thought she was probably Rashid's sister, but she still couldn't understand why she had come to the tea party. The head maid approached Siana and told her that from that day on, she would receive the position of head maid. And Sana, upon hearing these words, shouted that the opinion of the older maid was complete nonsense. And supposedly, none of the other maids understand the decision made regarding Siana. The head of cleaning explained that there was a tea party a couple of days ago, and it was actually a test of their skills. And she was sure that no one doubted that Siana did the best. Therefore, the head of cleaning announced her for a new position and declared the matter closed. She informed Siana that she must be at the Ruby Castle at dawn, because from that day on she would serve Princess Eris. All these ladies wanted to become head maids. She arrived later than the others. But she was accepted first, so Siana did not want to stand out so much, but still ended up ahead of everyone. She realized with horror that all the maids probably hated her now. And most likely, she would have to get used to an attitude that did not exist among them before. But the maids congratulated her, and Siana felt that they were very happy for her. And she was making up all sorts of nonsense. They said they were very sad, but they couldn't do anything now. They probably didn't get promoted to the rank of senior maids, but they didn't want to be envious villains. Because Siana even fed them these wonderful Victoria apples. But in fact, they turned out to be completely different people, and completely different from those surrounding Siana in the kingdom. Jean saw how the other maids rejoiced at her victory, and declared that the ladies were incredibly hypocritical towards her. She couldn't understand how Siana, with such a dark origin, could become a maid before her. Then the angry lady really acted horribly, but in reality all she could do was leave. And complain to her dad. Sana shouted at everyone, but the maids quickly forgot while enjoying the delicious food. And conversations. Fortunately, Siana had very little luggage and didn't even imagine that she would move somewhere from here. But from tomorrow, she had a new position as a senior maid in the imperial palace. You can stay as a junior maid for as long as you want, but for a girl, it was much better than being a princess. Siana knew she was very tired and it was a good job, but suddenly she heard so many things at her bedroom door. It was Huhu who said that she only wanted to see the winner of this fight. She modestly extended her hand, and it turned out that in her palm was a beautiful hairpin that the maid wanted to give to her friend in honor of her promotion. Chuhu really wanted to please the girl and bought something quickly, but she really hoped she would like this hairpin very much. The maids were allowed to tidy themselves up a bit, and then Juju told Siana not to dare to think that she was worse than anyone else, and to continue with her head held high. The maid knew that the junior maid received very little, but still, Juju bought her this gift. And probably with her savings. Siana couldn't help but burst into tears, because Juju's kindness simply made her heart ache. She hurried to hug her dear friend with words of thanks, because she really liked this hairpin. At that moment, they perfectly felt how close friends they are, and most importantly, they can support each other at any time. The next day, the head maid wondered if Princess Eris didn't have her own maid. But one of them said that she was the previous maid of this princess, and she asked to be transferred here because the work there was unbearable. She understood that this seemed illogical, but she said that something was wrong with that work, and only those who were there knew it. And it's better to scrub floors and run errands than to go back to work in the same place. And she was sure that there was no such maid in nature who was completely suitable for the princess. And at least in her empire, there is definitely no person who can cope with this unusual princess. The next morning, Siana was ready to leave very early and stood near the mirror, tidying herself up and rejoicing in her new hairpin. She was the princess of a defeated kingdom, and now she had become a maid of the imperial palace. But she was sure that only success awaited her. Siana traveled in a carriage with a maid who worked in the imperial palace. And she said that no one wants to stay in this position for long, and that if she had that opportunity, she would have left a long time ago. The lady also said that working in the imperial palace is very difficult, especially when you have to interact with the princess herself. The maid shared that the princess is not only picky, but she is the cruelest monster in the empire. One day, the emperor fell in love with a dancer named Rosemary and gave her a small palace with a garden called the Ruby Palace. His daughter, who is the 7th princess, now lives in this palace. If Anna thought, surely this child is being treated this way because her mother is of low birth, and she has no chance to grow up beautiful and healthy in such an environment. They entered the girl's room, and she saw in front of her a red-haired baby in dirty clothes, and holding a huge spider in her hands. The girl asked why she wasn't afraid, and Siana replied that she didn't understand what had happened, and that now she would do what the princess wanted. Since the baby really wanted to be scared by her appearance, Siana had to play this role and pretend to be horrified when she saw the little vagrant. After this introduction, she asked permission to introduce herself and said that it was a great honor for her to meet the princess. But the girl couldn't understand, because she did everything possible to make the new maid afraid of her and run away from this place, but for some reason she wasn't afraid of her at all. And run away from this place, but for some reason she wasn't afraid of her at all. The girl said that the new maid was very boring and asked her to leave, slamming the door behind her. Siana approached the maid who worked here before her and told her that she was now free. She had wanted to leave here for a long time, but couldn't because there was no replacement. And thanks to Siana, she is now free. She said there was nothing unusual here and that you only need to take care of the princess. And you can do everything else at your own discretion, and there will still only be her. And this little devil. Siana didn't really understand what she should do now, but she knew one thing. She had to perform her duties well. So first she decided to do some cleaning, and after a few hours, she saw a wonderful result. The girl approached her inaudibly and told her that the maid was up to some other nonsense. The little one tried to appear formidable, but she was very interested in the appearance of a new person in the palace. Siana spoke very politely to the little princess, but she didn't believe that they were finally treating her like a real princess, because no one had ever treated her like that. And she was sure that the lady would flee at the first opportunity. That night, Rashid was thinking about the recent tea party he had attended magically disguised as his sister. He thought Siana's smile was very sweet, and since the Ruby Palace was very close, they would surely see each other soon. While Rashid was thinking of a new plan to meet Siana, she was trying to meet the sassy princess in the imperial palace. The maid told the girl that she didn't care how she behaved, because she was just a servant. And she received a salary, and since they would pay more here, she had no reason to refuse this job. Therefore, if Anna promised that while working here, she would try to serve the little princess and take proper care of her, because she is her servant, and this is her direct responsibility. Since all the previous maids ran away screaming from the naughty girl, this aunt seemed very strange to her. Siana brought the girl a vegetable breakfast in the morning, but she said she would like to have her favorite cakes for breakfast. In our tapas, the maid said that the girl wouldn't grow up on cakes alone, but the girl was sure that she was growing normally anyway. Siana said that the girl looks incredibly thin and cannot be treated like this. Even if there are some excuses for it, and no matter how difficult it is, this girl needs her own approach. The maid stood firm and invited the princess to breakfast again, and after breakfast, she promised to give her a sweet cake. Siana opened the window and said in a soft voice that now is the best time, because morning has arrived. The birds are singing pleasantly, and the warm sun has already risen. But the baby wrapped herself in a blanket and said she wanted to sleep and wouldn't have breakfast. She threateningly told the maid that she wanted a normal breakfast, but Siana said that was all that was left, because she herself had eaten a butter sandwich and a whole baked chicken. The girl was beside herself with rage and shouted why the maid dared to eat all that. The maid said that usually servants have to finish eating for their masters. And since the girl refused breakfast, she quickly ate it. Getting a picky child to eat is easy, and if Anna used a proven method, if you don't eat your food quickly, she will eat it herself. And any child stops being picky when they are made to understand the values of food. The educational event didn't end there, and another method followed, in which the food the child doesn't want to eat is the one the adult likes the most. This trick also worked on Eris, who is quite a capricious girl, so she ate all the vegetables with difficulty. Siana patted her head and praised the baby because she was the best princess. This behavior was quite strange for the little princess, because all the maids who had come before were completely different. Siana had figured out healthy eating and now needed to figure out hygiene. So she brought toiletries and told her that the girl would have to bathe. The little vagrant hated water and washing because the foam irritated her and the brush hurt a lot. But the maid replied, if the girl doesn't wash, then she might attract beetles that like to live where it's dirty. Siana was a very smart maid and knew how to handle children, so she told the girl that her head probably itched a lot. And it was all because insects were eating it at that moment. The joke with the bugs helped a lot, and within a few seconds, the little one was sitting in the tub asking the lady to wash them quickly. She took out the softest sponge, and Ari was surprised that the wipe wasn't even prickly, but on the contrary, soft and pleasant. After bathing, Siana also managed to brush the girl's teeth, and tired, she got into bed after all and said that the maid had exhausted her incredibly today. She patted the girl's head and thanked her for firmly enduring all the bathing procedures. But now it was time for the lady to go to bed, and Siana suggested reading the girl a fairy tale. The girl shouted the maid really wasn't going to leave her alone, but the lady only wanted to help her fall asleep by reading her a very interesting story. And exciting. When Siana was about to leave, the little one changed her mind and suddenly asked her to stop. She frowned and said that the maid could only tell one story, but quickly. Siana was delighted and began to tell a story about when, a long time ago, a diamond princess lived. This princess, as her name suggests, loved sparkling diamonds, collecting diamonds from all over the world. And she decorated her outfits with them, so she herself shone like a real diamond. One day, the princess heard the rumor that an evil dragon lives in the west. And he has a diamond that is the rarest and most beautiful in the world. The princess desired this diamond so much that she embarked on a journey alone through thorns and swamps. But when she finally reached the dragon's tower, he looked at her and told her that this girl was very beautiful, and that if she married the dragon, he would give her this diamond. A few minutes later, little Ari fell fast asleep, and Siana carefully straightened her blanket and wished the girl good night. She looked at the sleeping baby and felt that she definitely needed to take care of her so that she would grow up healthy and strong. And that was her true duty as a princess's maid. Everything has changed in the imperial palace since this maid appeared here. The next day, while going for a walk, the girl was playing in the courtyard. But suddenly, she stepped on something she shouldn't have stepped on. Siana said that she had just planted seeds here and that you shouldn't step on them. Otherwise, they would be damaged and would not grow. She planted roses, sunflowers, and hydrangeas, and many other different flowers that would bloom and delight them. And when they bloomed, she promised to make a beautiful flower crown for the baby. The girl didn't understand why Siana treated her so kindly and was sure that this lady was definitely plotting something. She wanted to bring it to light, so she came up with a very interesting plan. She saw a hairpin on the ground next to the maid and instantly put it on her head. Perhaps if Anna was completely upset and didn't notice how it fell off. But when she saw it on the girl's head, she asked for the hairpin back because it was a gift from a good friend. She politely asked the girl to return the item because she knew she had recently dropped the hairpin. But the girl unexpectedly declared that this palace belongs to her, and everything in it also belongs only to her. If Anna had to say in a stern voice that this thing was very dear to her, so the baby should give it away. But Eris was surprised that the gentle and kind servant suddenly became so strict. Eris didn't want to just give away the hairpin and said that the maid would have to catch her first. She was sure that she would never catch her because not a single maid could catch the baby. But she didn't expect Siana to catch her and start scolding her because taking other people's things and not returning them is very bad. The maid held out her hand to the girl and asked her to return the hairpin again. But the little one was worried about something completely different. She got very angry and threw the hairpin into the water, shouting that she wasn't going to return it. The hairpin slowly landed in one of the fountains, and Siana sadly watched everything that had just happened. That night, Princess Eris had a very strange dream where a maid approached her and promised to take care of the princess. The girl felt that the lady was incredibly similar to her mother, but unexpectedly the maid was stopped and accused of theft, expelled from the Ruby Palace. The girl then tried to help the maid, but no one listened to the little princess at all. The maid said she thought the girl would be useful since she was a princess and could protect her thanks to her title. But everything turned out differently, and little Eris was simply used again. Everyone laughed at the little princess because she didn't even have a mother and was completely powerless. Despite her title, this was probably due to the fact that she was a commoner. So all the maids abandoned this unpromising position and fled from the overly ill-mannered princess. Suddenly, among these maids, the girl saw Siana, who said some very offensive words to her. Then she turned around and said that she was also tired of little Eris, so she was forced to leave her. The baby woke up from a terrible nightmare, but some truth was in this dream. And indeed, Eris was very worried. Since all the servants were leaving her, Siana must have packed her bags last night. And it would be better for her to leave today than to betray her later. At that moment, a cheerful maid approached the princess and told her that the sun had already risen, and that it was time for the girl to get up too. She went to Eris's bed and told her that if the lady didn't want to get up, it would be better for her to sleep a little. And when a person is sleepy, they have very little appetite. The little princess was sure that after throwing her hairpin into the fountain, the maid should have packed her things and left her, but to her great surprise, she was still here, and moreover, she was still taking care of her. The girl rushed to hug Siana and told her that she really didn't want to offend her, and that she didn't want the maid to hate her. Siana said what the girl did yesterday was really unpleasant. But she understands that sometimes children do thoughtless things, but since the lady realized her fault and apologized, she felt much better. Children are sometimes surprisingly insightful. And Eris was very worried that the maid had to do many things in the palace and was here alone and was absolutely useless. So she promised to help with cleaning and not be picky about food. The little princess promised to be a good girl, and Siana didn't expect the girl to change her behavior so dramatically. The baby asked the maid to stay with her for a long time and not to leave her, like the previous ones did. The lady promised to definitely stay, but now in front of her, she only saw a naughty little liar. Crying from remorse, Siana really wanted to help this girl grow up healthy and happy, so she promised to do everything possible to ensure that everything was fine for her. After that, Princess Eris no longer misbehaved. She watered the flower beds, and at noon helped with cleaning and laundry. However, it was not clear to what extent this little one's help could be appreciated. But she clearly did her best. One of those days, Siana told the little lady that she had a more important task to do than cleaning and washing. She told the girl that she needed to study, but not necessarily read complex adult books, but at least practice her writing skills. For some reason, Siana couldn't find ink and paper in her box, so she had to go to the butler, who refused to give her just office supplies. The maid smiled sweetly and insisted that the princess needed it for her studies. But the man replied that if she needed additional materials, she must obtain written permission from another member of the imperial family. And it seems that this time Siana didn't get it, and the princess suggested asking her brother Rashid, who was a member of the imperial family. The maid was surprised that the girl and the boy got along, but the little one was sure that her brother was the only one who could help her. Siana wondered if the crown prince would probably appreciate her idea of educating his sister and react positively to the idea. Therefore, she should definitely try to send a letter to His Majesty. But before she had time to think about it, the palace door opened and Rashid himself, to whom she was going to send the letter, entered. The ladies wondered how it was possible that they had just sent a letter, and the young man had already arrived. He said the letter said that his beloved sister needed help, so he hurried. And he even brought permission. But Rashid was not going to give it away, so the little princess began to get angry. The young man said that he also brought everything necessary to prepare tea and asked Siana to prepare tea. The maid was very surprised to see that the prudent young man took everything with him. She understood that they were not far from the imperial palace, so she did not rule out the possibility that, in one way or another, she and the crown prince would meet again. She would never have thought that this meeting would take place under such circumstances. Sion noted that the young man did not take his eyes off her and thought he could probably remember her. She prepared him a cup of aromatic tea, and the young man said, "It turns out the lady is not just a servant, but a true tea master." The crown prince was once again convinced that this girl made excellent tea, incredibly different from anything he had tasted before. Rashid told his little sister that he was the one who hired Siana as a servant, and he was the one who sent her to work at the Ruby Palace. Saul said that His Highness needed to be in the Imperial Council, and that in order not to be late, they should leave right now. But the young man said he hadn't finished his tea yet. The girl looked into the empty teapot and said that her brother had drunk all the tea so he could safely continue with his business. The crown prince approached the maid and confessed that thanks to her, he enjoyed excellent tea again. The maid replied that she felt very flattered by such pleasant words and tried to do everything possible to make the young man like it, because that is her job. Siana told the little princess that she didn't even know that she and the crown prince had such a good relationship, because he immediately came in person and even brought a signed permission. But the little princess was sure that in the future she would owe him permission, because she and her siblings were competing for the throne, and there could be no good relations between them. Nothing would change until one of the heirs ascended the throne. That is, they were not siblings, but rivals. Eris looked into the distance and thought, saying that she didn't care at all because she had no family, nor friends, nor a normal childhood with care and love. Siana understood that if the crown prince cared about Princess Eris, she would not live here on Earth, abandoned by everyone. The princess only gained power when she had already been named successor, and Siana also had to grow up early because there was no happiness in her life. As a child, she worried a lot about how to secretly hide pepper under the table during dinner, which she didn't like, and how to sneak away to sleep in late at least once. She would like the worries of these children to be the only thing occupying her. But everything was different, and now all she could do for the princess was to give her love, affection, and care. After Rashid gave her the signed permission, he left Saul in a carriage to the imperial palace, and he was moved by how cute the maid looked. He smiled and said that he didn't even know whether to take her now or wait a little longer. He wondered if Saul had noticed anything unusual in the palace, but the young man was sure that when they arrived, everything was unusually clean. It seemed to him that Siana had put things in order there, and Princess Eris now looked much healthier and well-groomed, and he wondered if this maid really knew how to raise children. Rashid also noticed that the little princess had definitely opened up to this maid Siana. Saul wondered if the crown prince had planned all this from the beginning. The most important thing is that Rashid realized that this lady treats people well, regardless of their status. But of course, this is incredibly little for him to fall in love with her. From the day his little sister was born, his life changed for the better. Little Rashid often leaned against his mother Eris's belly to listen to the baby kicking with her legs. Therefore, he is very worried about the little princess and wants to return to Siana's tea party. The next day was special for Siana because she unexpectedly saw her friend Hushu, whom she hadn't seen since she left her previous workplace. They met by chance in front of the warehouse, and as soon as they saw each other, they started hugging tightly and rejoiced at the meeting. They were in a hurry to tell each other how each one was, but one thing was clear: they were incredibly happy to see each other. Not long ago, the crown prince visited Eris with the words that his little sister probably wanted to thank him. She and Saul brought a large cake with a lot of chocolate, and Eris was very captivated by this sweetness. Rashid invited everyone to sit together and have aromatic tea with an incredibly delicious cake. Little Eris was already drooling and waiting to finally put this sweet piece in her mouth. The little princess was very happy that her brother was finally spending time with her and paying attention to her. They admired the tea that Siana prepared for a long time, and her drink was truly the best. Unexpectedly, Eris told her brother that she would like to ask him for one thing. Siana's hairpin fell into the lake and needed to be found. It turned out that the crown prince immediately called 100 guards and dried the lake, all to find a small hairpin about which Siana was now standing and telling Shuju. She also gave her a package of soap and candles, made her a princess dress from luxurious fabrics, and much more. One evening, Siana had to deliver boxes, and the most unexpected thing was that the crown prince was nearby again at that moment. Without a doubt, he helped the girl load a cart with boxes, so the maid was very surprised by such care. The young man smiled and said that he helped the lady simply because he wanted to, and words of gratitude were enough for him. He sweetly said that Siana was very small, and the cart with the boxes was very large, so she couldn't do it without his help. And that night, she ran away to avoid a closer conversation, saying that the princess was looking for her. But she was sure that His Highness looked a little crazy, as if he were a little mad. At that moment, an angry Ari approached Siana and told her that she had come to look for her because the maid had been gone too long. The maid replied that she had prepared cookies for the girl before leaving, and that these little cookies were really delicious. She took Siana's hand and told her that she was very hungry and that she should feed her. In fact, Ari was simply jealous of Siana or anyone who talked to her, even if it was for a few minutes. Therefore, the little princess began to pretend to be a capricious girl and was not happy to talk too much with her friend. Siana claimed that this lady is very kind and sweet, that's why she treats her well, and they are good friends. But after these words, the girl only asked to be given more meat from today on, and milk so that she could become as strong as this Juju. These whims did not cause problems for the maid, who considered Eris a real darling. But what was really unpleasant was the crown prince, who often got in her way. The little one asked her brother why he had returned, because she hadn't asked him for anything. The young master said that he came to check the condition of the pond, and at the same time brought many sweets and a huge cake. The crown prince was acting quite suspiciously, and Siana couldn't tell if he was in his right mind. One of the maids informed the lady that Rashid had returned to the Ruby Palace recently. She also said that the young man brought many cookies and sweets that Princess Eris likes. And Princess Yvette was very irritated by this and was determined to deal with it. Yvette was the fifth princess and was an incredibly capricious and arrogant girl. the fifth empress tried to assure the girl that she should understand, because Eris was just a poor child. But she wanted to remind her little sister where she belonged and was sure that she had to personally teach her a lesson as an older sister. Recently, Eris received a letter from Yvette saying that she wanted to have a pleasant conversation with her little sister, and that she had prepared a small tea party for her. Eris read that the girl wanted to mock her, and that if she didn't come, there would be a real scandal. Throughout every tea party, they laughed at any mistake she made in her clothing or behavior, implying that she had no right to call herself a princess, since the girl didn't know how to dress properly or behave according to etiquette. They said she was a princess only in name. Siana said that the girl had absolutely nothing to worry about because she would prepare everything for the tea party. And she would teach the baby good manners. She took a book from the shelf and promised to tell the girl everything, and the little princess was surprised how this lady knew everything. Siana said that she is just the junior maid of the captured kingdom and the special maid of Princess Eris. She postponed it until then because the princess didn't want to learn, but this can no longer continue. And a lady needs to know the minimum etiquette to survive in the imperial castle, and not just show off in front of others. Therefore, the next day the training began, and Siana told her all the intricacies of tea making. She said that the old cannot drink tea until the owner says so, and furthermore, cannot make sounds when drinking. After taking a sip, you must put the cup on the table, and you also cannot make sounds. Eris listened carefully to the maid and didn't understand why such a simple tea party was actually so complicated. But the girl did her best to understand the art of tea and behave like a true lady. Eris did very well, and after a few repetitions, the girl began to feel more confident in her words and gestures. Siana only had time to praise the little princess, who handled all the tasks perfectly. Unlike nobles, for whom modesty is a virtue, royalty was completely different. It was already getting dark outside, and meanwhile, an uninvited guest approached the little princess. It was the crown prince, and he noticed that his little sister was more reserved than before. He also kept his eyes on the maid, who was with them the whole time, and watched how the little princess showed herself. Rashid suggested that, most likely, Eris started behaving this way due to the maid's good education. The study of etiquette was completed, and then the little princess had to try on a luxurious dress and various jewelry for girls. Siana spent several days sewing this particular dress because she wanted to prepare a dress that would be perfect for the little princess. For the first time, the girl wore a dress that she felt comfortable in and was surprised that she actually liked her appearance. Siana said with admiration that the little princess looked incredible and resembled the pink fairy from the myth. The baby was very happy to hear these words and said that she looked as beautiful as her mother. Siana was sure that at today's tea party, the little princess would definitely win the heart of His Highness with her charm. And all because she is the beautiful and proud daughter of the incredible Lady Rosemary. Before the tea party began, the ladies were already talking about the guests who were supposed to arrive today. And Eris was the first to go unnoticed, of course. The last time they saw each other, the little princess acted very strangely, eating with her hands, and wearing dirty and ragged clothes, thus degrading the royal family. They made unpleasant comments about Eris and her appearance, waiting for her arrival so they could laugh at her again. But what a surprise it was when they saw in front of them not a dirty and ragged woman, but a beautiful and sweet young lady in an incredibly luxurious pale blue dress with satin bows. The girl looked at her gloating friends and greeted the most important villain among them, whose name was Yvette. The little one was very nervous before going out, but she remembered the maid's words, who said that a lady must never stop smiling, and losing her smile in this place means admitting defeat. One of the girls couldn't believe that a savage like Eris was now acting like a real princess. Eris tried to behave with restraint and observe all the rules of decency at the children's tea party. The girl noticed that at the last meeting, Eris behaved like a monkey, but now she didn't even have anything to complain about. And this little lady behaved perfectly. She couldn't believe that little Princess Eris had changed so much thanks to this maid. Yvette took her empty cup and said that it seemed her cup was empty and asked for it to be refilled. Sienna took the teapot, but the capricious young lady said that she would like her beloved little sister to serve her tea instead of the maid. Just because you learned etiquette doesn't mean you really know it. Yvette watched closely as Eris served the tea, but to her great regret, not a single drop spilled. And the angle of inclination was simply perfect, so much so that she even had the impression that she was serving the queen. Yvette realized that the only way to confuse the little princess was to make a mistake instead of her. But at that moment, Sienna approached and asked the young lady to stop, because everyone clearly saw how she deliberately reached out her hand towards the cup. The maid said that she could not just sit and watch Yvette herself violate the rules of His Majesty. There is a rule that no one can punish members of the royal family without His Majesty's permission. However, this was only a mere formality, and the emperor's descendants are treated according to the power they have. And therefore, the weak will not cause any harm, no matter how much they are trampled upon. But if you openly punish another, rumors will quickly spread in secular society. And Bates said, Eris brought a brave maid, but it doesn't seem like she is disciplined enough. Because usually, a maid at this moment would dare to touch a member of the royal family, which would definitely be punished. So the maid slapped Sienna because the capricious Yvette demanded it. The girl laughed sarcastically because she managed to retaliate and was very satisfied with her trick. Eris looked fearfully at Yvette and Sienna, who was sitting on the concrete floor nearby with a red slap on her face. But unfortunately, no matter how much she wanted to do something, she could not contradict His Highness's son. Because she was a simple servant. Yvette rejoiced and asked Eris to sit quietly from now on, and keep her head down so that there would be no such incidents between them. After tea, the maid sat with the little princess in the carriage and asked her why if Anna did this. The girl perfectly understood that if she hadn't protected her, she would have received a blow. But even knowing this, she received the punishment instead of her. The girl considered herself useless and was sure that she was not worthy of being protected by an ordinary girl. And as soon as they arrived, the little princess healed the maid's wound, but since she didn't know anything about this, the maid had to teach her. She told her in order what should be done with the wound and how to disinfect it. Suddenly, the little princess started crying, and the girl asked her if she was upset about what happened today. In this case, she suggested that Eris become strong enough to take revenge and face any challenge, even if the path to revenge would be painful. The little one looked closely at Sienna, and since she sincerely trusted her, she didn't doubt her words for a moment, and said that she didn't care at all anymore and was willing to do anything. Sienna promised to help the girl in everything, as she knows a lot about the subject and can share her secrets. After this, the maid asked the little one why she thought this happened. And she was sure because she was younger than Yvette, but soon it occurred to her that she might offend her because of her low status. They discovered that Yvette bullies her just because she has a mother, and the little princess had no mother. Sienna said that to become a strong princess, Eris needs an influential person on her side, because this is the fastest and most effective way of all kinds. We need someone who has imperial power but does not fight for the throne, and who fully supports the little princess. The helper informed Rashid that Sienna was injured, and they saw her when she got out of the carriage after returning from Princess Yvette. The young man didn't even listen to her words because he intended to solve this problem. But Saul was sure that the crown prince should not interfere in imperial affairs. He asked the young man to think about what would happen if His Majesty dealt with the maid's insult during a conversation between the princesses. In the end, it would be Sienna who would have the biggest problems. Moreover, Princess Eris is also a contender for the throne, and at the same time Sienna's lover. But in fact, Saul believed the opposite, and a strong crown prince could not speak on behalf of the princess. And he was sure that Rashida's mother would clearly not approve of such an act. Rashid put his sword to Saul's throat and said that, although he is his old friend, he no longer intends to listen to all this nonsense. The young man admitted that he had gone too far and immediately apologized to His Majesty. Rashid was sure that everything was going according to his plan, and Siana really cared about Eris. And Eris also cared about Siana. Behind the crown prince was a man who had imperial power, but no right to the throne. This man had to be completely on Princess Eris's side. And this person is the Dowager Empress Goldria herself. If it weren't for her, the absence of the Empress's mother wouldn't have mattered much. Siana told the little princess that the most suitable person for her was the Empress, and that she needed to win her over to her side. She also said that the Empress not only had a son, but also a little daughter. Then a misfortune happened to the baby. She died before she turned 10. She drank a poison that someone brought, and which was intended for the emperor. But instead of mourning her daughter's death, the Dowager Empress decided to shamelessly take advantage of the situation. Of course, she mercilessly punished those who killed her daughter and tried to kill her son. But she also took advantage of this situation to eliminate her political opponents and, as a result, her son's power was established and the crown prince became emperor. Therefore, the people in the imperial castle, who knew the truth, believed that the empress was a very heartless person. But Shiana was sure that somewhere deep inside, she simply missed her daughter. The time came when she moved away from her son, for whom she had already sacrificed so much, and was forgotten by the emperor himself. Her senior maid approached the empress and apologized to her highness. She said that a letter had arrived from a certain seventh princess, Eris. Shiana and Eris wrote this letter specifically so that the empress would sympathize with her highness. They wrote in a letter that the empress must be strong, despite the difficulties that happened to her. This afternoon, the lady read this letter and was a little confused by its content. Without reading the letter to the end, the empress tore it up and didn't even go into the details of its meaning. The little princess did not stop and continued to write letters. But the empress ordered every letter that arrived from her to be thrown in the trash. She didn't want to waste time paying attention to this letter because she was sure there was nothing interesting there. But even if people are constantly rejected, others only need to arouse a little interest. Therefore, when the next letter arrived, the empress decided to see what was written there. For her plan to work, Siana sprinkled the envelope with peach perfume to create a sense of innocence. The empress opened the letter and tried to understand what it was about. She realized that these were exquisite words addressed to her, from a man who had sharpened himself like a sword. It was her granddaughter, and the empress thought that the girl was not actually growing up so stupid. Eris tried for a long time to connect her thoughts into a sentence and write a letter with interesting content. But the little princess was very annoyed because she had to write every letter when writing. And she didn't understand why adults like to do this. And finally, the hard work of writing a beautiful letter paid off, and fortunately, the empress responded to them, showing her true feelings. The little princess no longer wanted to write such stupid letters that, in her opinion, simply contained flattery. And nothing more. The empress called her maid, who had previously served in the Ruby Palace, and decided to find out what the princess was like. The next day, little Eris ran out of her room to tell the maid some urgent news. Since the girl went up the stairs very quickly, the maid was afraid she would fall and hurt herself. Therefore, this is exactly what happened. And on the last flight of stairs, the little princess stumbled and fell to the floor with a crash. Siana saw that she had a letter in her hand, which she clearly wanted to show her. After the fall, the girl got up, and, as if nothing had happened, loudly declared that her grandmother had finally invited her to her castle. After long and meticulous preparations, the maid and Eris arrived at the empress's invitation. In front of them stood a majestic and stately lady, who quietly asked them to come in, and greeted the dear guests. Eris told the empress that she would like to thank her for the invitation, so she prepared a small gift especially for her. The girl handed her a glass bottle containing rare acacia flower tea leaves. The little one admitted that she had heard that the empress liked flowers and tea. So she tried to prepare it herself to please everyone's preferences. The girl modestly handed the bottle to the empress and asked her to accept it as a token of gratitude and respect. Before the meeting, the maid told the empress that the young princess had violet eyes. just like Her Majesty, and that the young one was the same age as the youngest princess. And those special purple eyes of the royal family reminded her of the deceased princess. The little princess invited the empress to have tea together, and the girl was determined to show the lady all the skills she had learned. The empress appreciated the taste of the tea, and Eris happily said that she was glad that the lady liked everything. The conversation that followed was the same as in the letters. Complaints about past glories and words of praise in return. Inside, this absurdity makes no sense, but on the outside, it looks astonishingly beautiful. A teacup quietly placed on the table, a spoon for stirring the tea, and the corners of a mouth slightly opening when drinking. A perfect mastery of court etiquette, like wielding a sword so as not to offend others. The court ladies had to cover their mouths when speaking and laughing to look more elegant. Poems had to be read quietly, and at the same time, it was important to maintain an elegant posture. And beautiful. Siana knew all the complexities of court etiquette, so it was not difficult for her to teach the little princess. And all this was just for a special day, when the little princess was going to meet Her Majesty the Empress. The little princess and the venerable lady spent a lot of time discussing the beautiful flowers in the garden and the magnificent aromatic tea. And Ari tried hard to please the empress and surprise her with her grace. Time flew by while they were having tea, and the empress announced that it was time to end this incredibly pleasant meeting. But the girl was embarrassed, fearing she had taken up too much of Her Majesty's time, and asked for forgiveness. She thanked the empress for her pleasant and warm visit, and for the fact that this majestic lady had taken the time to visit her. Throughout this time, the empress could not stop thinking about the little princess who died tragically. This sweet child was a bright ray of life for her, and after her departure, the empress's world turned upside down. Then the lady did not know that soon her daughter might not be worth it, so she always put palace affairs first, and not the upbringing of the baby. But now every day she remembered her daughter, whom she would never see again. The empress saw Eris as her little princess, because the girl was incredibly similar to her. And in those huge violet eyes, she saw the soul of her daughter, who even after death would always be there. After this meeting, the little princess was turning over various thoughts in her head for a long time. And she couldn't stop thinking about the empress's visit. The little one said today that she was surprised and sure that these people had no blood, nor tears, nor soul, but everything turned out to be completely wrong. For the first time, Siana saw such behavior in the little princess, and was very happy that the girl began to behave differently. She understood that there was still a bigger problem here, and this was a feeling of guilt that could not last long if the lady had a wound in her heart. So she asked if the girl probably felt that she was deceiving the empress and, therefore, felt unpleasant. But the little one was sure that it was not like that at all, and the problem was completely different. And during all the time they spent together, this woman didn't even ask anything about her. Surely, nothing interested her about the abandoned orphan princess, and she only noticed how beautiful and well-mannered Eris was. Therefore, the little princess realized how important it was for her to be like her daughter. And if she knew her true identity, she would never smile like that. The baby jumped out of bed and threateningly declared that she was experiencing negative emotions from all these hugs, and that she would never hug anyone again. Eris stopped for a moment and suddenly asked the maid if she had done well today. The lady looked at her affectionately and replied that the girl was a great person and managed everything perfectly. And she did her best to be a beautiful and proud princess. Siana was afraid of one thing, that the little princess, trying to find her place, would eventually get lost, but she perfectly understood that the girl had no other choice. On this warm summer afternoon, the maid went out because she had an appointment with the crown prince. The lady stated that today, she and the little princess were able to succeed only thanks to his help. Because recently, Eris asked the young man to tell her even minor information about the empress's deceased daughter. And since her request was sincere, Rashid could not refuse and helped her. Siana learned from the crown prince information that in the empress's warm memories, there were fragments of the deceased princess. the scent of white acacia that she loved so much, the color of her favorite dresses, and her favorite poem, if these fragments are allowed to penetrate the subconscious. This will be enough for the Empress to feel guilty and docilely fall in love with the false daughter. Then the maid stood in front of Rashid and asked how she could thank him. The young man asked her to answer one question and asked why the girl, of all the people in the palace, had chosen the Empress. As a powerless princess and with survival in mind, Siana had to devise a plan. Thinking about how she could gain support, she began to collect information about the imperial family. And only then did she learn that the Empress's little daughter had died. When she learned this new information, she created a grand plan. But now she realized that this was nonsense, because there was no way she could meet the Empress of this distant empire. But now, thanks to the crown prince, she arrived in the empire, and Princess Eris could take advantage of her plan. And all thanks to Rashid. The young man suddenly asked if the lady felt offended by him for changing her destiny. The girl said that she does not regret what happened at all, because her parents humiliated her. And she constantly thought about running away from them. And now she was sincerely, incredibly happy. The young man thought not everyone would dare to say such a thing to the person who killed their family. She felt that this strong lady also had a fierce side, because she said these words with a very sweet expression on her face. And since the maid's plan had worked, she had to move on to the next task immediately. Eris and Siana sent an invitation to Yvette because they decided to have a tea party and make her the first guest. Yvette didn't know what this little one was up to again, but in order not to discredit her honor, she arrived at the tea party. Yvette noticed that the little princess had changed a lot just 3 months ago. She looked like a savage. She decided to see how long Eris would last because she wanted to show her where her place was. She lifted the lid of the porcelain cup and asked the little princess to pour her tea. But this time, she wanted her maid to do it. Siana poured the tea into the cups without any issues, and Yvette wondered how she could excite the little princess. So she suddenly announced that she was looking at her. Yvette imagined that the maid held a grudge against her and decided that she definitely needed to be taught a lesson, and asked her to give her a whip. The girl shouted, "Eris really thinks that if she received the Empress's favor now, she can talk to her like that. And she is really sure she can rely on the Empress just because she is the Emperor's biological mother." Yvette insisted that the man the little one trusted so much had no power. And all because His Majesty had abandoned her a long time ago. And everyone understood it as soon as he ascended the throne, and only little Eris knew something about it. Yvette called her incredibly stupid, just because Eris chose this woman as her friend. Suddenly, they heard words that one of these girls had an incredibly dirty mouth because of the words she was saying. It was Her Majesty, the Empress, who was standing in front of the little ladies right now, staring at one of them. And it was clear to everyone that Yvette would no longer be able to get away with it. The day they met the Empress, the little one decided to share her opinion with her and ask her for advice. She said that in a few days, she was organizing her first tea party. She invited Yvette, but she was very afraid of making a mistake, as there were no adults in her castle who could teach her. The Empress thought this girl had no mother, so she might as well help the little one who had lived without parents her whole life. Yvette was surprised. She was sure that the Empress had lost her authority and hadn't been in the castle for a long time. But now she clearly saw Her Majesty in front of her. The lady couldn't believe that this little one had the audacity to insult her and spread rumors, let alone treat her with disrespect. She asked again if the insolent Yvette really just wanted to punish the maid Eris with a whip. The Empress was outraged by this child's upbringing, so she took the whip in her hands and said that now, with her permission, she would show her what happens when she has this not-so-childish weapon in her hands. She asked her to pick up a dress, while Yvette shouted about her descent from Her Majesty. And no matter how much the lady wanted to punish her, she first needed to obtain the consent of His Majesty the Emperor. But the Empress was surprised that this little one dared to threaten her, referring to her own son. And she asked the little one to call him here so everyone could see his reaction together. and she was sure that the young man under no circumstances would forgive such ignorance. She shouted loudly again for the little lady to pick up her dress, and the little one had no choice but to do as the Empress told her. Yvette was sure that her mother would not let it go like this, because she said she would always protect her. But not everything went as the insolent little one expected. At that moment, her mother arrived, who said that the Empress was very grateful to be personally teaching a child who still lacked a lot. She asked Yvette to thank her, and the little one did not expect it. She couldn't believe this was happening to her, but she bowed her head and thanked the Empress. The girl blamed everything on the maid, who constantly stood in her way. This day was special for Eris, and she couldn't believe the Empress was so helpful after everything she had been through. Siana was glad the little one could ask her for help, but she was very worried about whether the little princess was okay. Eris said she always wondered why the Empress allowed her mother to die that day. Although she asked for help, no one tried to help her that fateful night. And the strangest thing is that the Empress never sent her a doctor, even though she knew the girl felt very ill. But no one did anything, and her mother died that same night amidst unbearable suffering. Although she hoped it wouldn't break her heart, the little one was left with a permanent wound that would never heal. And now the maid understood that this plan seemed to be an absolute failure rather than a success. Her mother had a low status, seduced the emperor, and even received his favor. But there were many rumors about her that she was now trying to give birth to a child, as if she were a member of the imperial family. They always pointed the finger at her and condemned her, and a girl carrying a child under her heart had no support. But there was the emperor's mother, a woman who possessed incredible strength and power. Then the Empress said she no longer wanted to contact the emperor and did not want to see him. That night Rosemary had a baby, and it was a girl who looked like a little angel. In a palace full of people wearing jewels and flowers, her mother looked completely different from her after the birth of her daughter. It was very much like a battlefield where everyone kills each other, and winning the love of the one who contributed to her mother's death was a very big mistake for Eris. The girl ran into her beloved maid's arms, asking what she should do next. In fact, she wanted to use the Empress until the end to finally destroy her. And this would be her incredible revenge. After the tea party, the Empress no longer came to Eris, and they hadn't seen each other since. But one day she received a message. Siana called the Empress to visit her and informed her that Princess Eris had been poisoned by someone in her own castle. She told the Empress, who arrived immediately, that the dessert sent to her was poisoned. Although it was not a lethal poison and did not last long, the doctor said the girl should recover soon. Perhaps due to her delicate health, the princess has shown no signs of improvement for a long time. The Empress thought she didn't tell the little princess anything because she was afraid of worrying her. But now she feels incredibly guilty towards her. Perhaps the Empress didn't even feel any guilt, although she knew very well that she was largely to blame for this little one. She kissed Eris on the forehead and wished her a speedy recovery because she was very worried about her. Yvette had already received information that Eris had been poisoned, and the girl didn't understand how she couldn't get out of bed for such nonsense. And this is exactly what happens to everyone if someone dares to be insolent to her. And now Yvette was sure that Eris would surely remember this lesson. But above all, she held a grudge against the maid Siana because of whom all this happened. At that moment, the maid brought a gift to Princess Yvette and told her that the Empress had sent it to her personally. To her beloved granddaughter, asking her to leave the past behind. This dessert was a warning that every person is responsible for their actions. So the Empress wholeheartedly asked her to accept it. After this incident, the Empress began to take great care of the little princess. But the girl did not react to her attention, saying that she didn't care and only wanted to rest. The princess didn't even like the tea the Empress prepared, which contained many herbs. She was indignant because the Empress probably only cared about her because she thought she was dying. And Yvette, in turn, constantly sent desserts for the girl, and it seemed that the plan of Eris and Siana had worked successfully. It was a very difficult fight, but these two young women managed to face everything. Eris wanted to use the Empress's kindness and care as she wished, and when the time came, she would ask the most important question. Why didn't she help her mother that terrible night and call the doctor she so desperately needed to keep her alive? Eris constantly wondered if she was such a bad person that her mother could be murdered. And if Anna didn't know at all how to answer such an adult question to the innocent little one. She stroked the baby's face and gently told her that kindness would never help one survive in the castle, and that the little princess's strong emotions could only destroy her soul. Eris hugged her beloved maid and thanked her for everything she had done for her, and asked her never to leave her because they could handle everything together. That night, when the maid met the crown prince, she asked him how she could thank him for the information she had heard. The young man refused, but Siana insisted that she only wanted to return the good deed he had done for them. Rashid wondered what he wanted to receive as a worthy reward for his help. And after thinking for a moment, he asked if the maid scion would like to move soon and work in his castle under his personal supervision. This morning, two maids couldn't decide between them which of the two dresses would be ideal for Princess Eris. One of the maids insisted that pink would suit her better, while another thought the little princess would look much more impressive in a light blue dress. At that moment, an angry Eris approached them and asked the maids not to bother Siana, and not to burden her with the torment of choice. The maids immediately drew the little princess's attention and now asked her to choose the color she liked best. Eris replied that both dresses were not bad and that she would still look cute in any dress. The princess recently told Siana that she didn't like the other maids, and that if Siana hadn't done anything at that moment, things would have continued this way. Not long before, as soon as the little princess found out about the other maids, she started shouting loudly at her pillow that she didn't want to see other maids here. Siana had to spend a lot of time explaining to the princess that there was nothing wrong with this. She said she would be happy to stay with the little lady in the castle for a long time, but that sometimes they might need help, and she promised to find a maid who valued the little princess as much as she did. Their first meeting was warm and welcoming, and the two twin maids arrived at the Ruby Castle to officially serve the princess. They promised to serve the young lady sincerely, and these two young maids were loyal friends of Hugh Hugh. The little princess remained capricious and said she didn't like these two identical maids, because she couldn't tell which was which, but it was obvious that the girl was simply expressing her discontent. Days passed, and the constant praise and good attitude of the maids finally melted the heart of the angry Eris. And their sweet speeches could bribe even the dragon of the fairy tale guarding the magic diamond. Siana told the girl she would be back soon, and the little one realized she had gone with the crown prince. As soon as she arrived at his palace, the first thing she saw was a table with a pile of treats. And the girl didn't understand what was happening here. In fact, she didn't even know that this young man held the status of crown prince. She was greeted by a maid who asked if she could serve the lady some tea. Siana was not used to being served by a maid because she usually did this job herself. But now she saw that the highest-ranking maid was standing in front of her because she had a gold badge on her uniform. After the maid greeted Siana, the crown prince approached her along with his cute animals. They sat at a huge table opposite each other, and Siana said he looked very strange with that cute bird on his head. The young man said he was taking his animals for a walk, and that's why he was late. He said he didn't greet the girl properly. He got up from his chair, bowed, and said that the lady was an honored guest for this castle. The young man said they could get straight to the point, and that all the girl had to do was eat all the desserts with him. Sion approved of the sweets with pleasure, and asked if that was all the young man wanted from her. From the taste, she knew that good ingredients were used in the sweets, and that's why she really liked the fruity aroma in every bite. And definitely, the cooks in the Crown Prince's castle were quite skilled. The girl asked what kind of skilled person had prepared all this magnificent food. The young man replied that this was his cook's job, and he only happily prepares food for his animals. And spending time with animals is quite fun and exciting. The Crown Prince, rumored to be emotionless, also had a side hidden from other eyes. And this cruel villain spent most of his time with his animals because he liked cute little animals. He asked Siana if she really didn't like looking at these magnificent animals. Seeing the crown prince, the girl remembered a story about a princess from a winter kingdom who was dazzlingly beautiful, but incredibly susceptible to the cold. Even when the fireplace was lit in the room, she was too cold. And then a little bird appeared and took pity on her. The bird perched on a branch and warmly spoke the words that would give the princess a piece of warm sun. Thanks to the little piece of sun brought by the little bird, the princess could see the beautiful outside world. And she was incredibly fascinated by the magic happening around her and was grateful to this little bird. She didn't have time to tell the story halfway when Rashid continued the ending instead. The girl shared that this fairy tale is told to children in her hometown and asked how the young man found out about it. He shared that someone told him when he was a child, although he remembered the story itself. But he didn't remember the person who told him at all. After meeting the crown prince, the girl left through the door and wondered how he knew this story. Because it was one of the fairy tales she invented when she was little and only told it to one person in her life. After that, everything went back to normal, and Siana was lucky enough to meet her good friend Chuchu again. She was showing off her new badge and said that she had also officially become a maid. Apparently, one of the guests at the tea party was impressed with Yushu's work skills and gave her a new position. The head maid asked her to go to Princess Rise's castle, so Yuhu became the maid of the imperial person. It was truly surprising, and Yushu admitted that she was completely bewildered to have received such a good offer. Yuhu asked if Shiana knew that a promotion test was coming up. She also asked if Siana would like to participate, but the girl affirmed that she had only officially become a maid 6 months ago. And she was sure she didn't have enough experience for it. Her friend was indignant because the lady lacked self-confidence, as she believed nothing was impossible for the brave Siana. Hushu argued that if she were promoted, she could do much more for herself. Besides, her salary would also increase, so why not take the opportunity while she could? And then she can buy the princess many cute gifts, and one day when she leaves the maids, she can open her own little shop. Siana, without thinking twice, decided that she would also participate in the competition. But soon, she didn't even find her name on the list of applicants. This was probably due to her background, and the problem is that the girl does not have an elite lineage. Eris's new maids were incredibly talented and had a lot of experience. But when they mentioned this, Siana noticed that neither of them had been promoted either. These two young women were daughters of hunters, and Siana was from a captured foreign kingdom. As soon as the little princess heard their conversation, she was indignant because how dare these people kill people for such reasons? The little one was angry, and Siana tried to calm her down by telling her that she couldn't do anything, and that the results were already announced. They both knew that the imperial castle was ruthless to everyone, so Shiana asked the little lady never to worry like that, and that they would find new opportunities anyway. And these opportunities will appear at the most opportune moment when each of them is ready. As stated, opportunities appear when you least expect them, so a few days later, Shiana received an uninvited visit. The head cleaner reported that she had not been promoted, although her skills were absolutely impeccable. But the lady has a very interesting proposal, and if she accepts the Empress's request and manages it, she will be promoted. The Empress is above the 4 concubines, who are no worse than the Empress herself, and each of whom could become her. One of these women asked a favor of the maid Siana, and the girl didn't understand at all what new changes were happening in her life. Siana couldn't refuse and happily approached the girl. She remembered her. She was the youngest of 4 concubines named Angelina, but she couldn't even imagine that she was so small and young. Siana greeted her courteously and told her it was an honor for her to meet the Lady of Honor. The girl realized that she had recently become a maid, but she was already very elegant, and she even turned an abandoned girl into an ideal princess who is now even supported by the Empress. She asked Siana to keep everything she saw a secret and took her to her son's room. Her request seemed to be to train him, but the girl did not ask to do it as brilliantly as Princess Eris. She suggested that Siana think carefully today and give an answer about her decision soon. Sayana noticed that the child's appearance was definitely different from usual. So she went to the crown prince and asked him to inquire about Prince Rise, the son of concubine Angelina. The young man listened attentively to Sayana's request and said that this child was 12 years old. And he was the fourth prince of Rise Levi Huan of Chaman, and that was all he knew. Since the child lives outside the castle, there is absolutely no information about him. Because the emperor was not interested in his children, so it was not difficult to arrange. For training purposes, he spends his time at Viscount William's house, the concubine's family home. But as there has been little news from the prince lately, rumors about the concubine eventually spread. People were sure that several years had passed since the birth of His Highness, the prince. And it was very suspicious that no one had seen him in the castle. The girl insisted that His Highness the Prince would return to the castle and greet everyone only when he turned 12. And until then, no one should bother him. Judging by what Sayana asked about the prince, there seemed to be some problems with him. The crown prince also warned that the girl should not be interested in the fourth prince. And the lady said she would be here if the young man needed anything. And in any case, the crown prince listened to her, and thanks to him, she received enough information. After the news that Sayana might be serving someone else, the little princess was indignant and completely disagreed with the lady abandoning her. But the girl said she wanted to become a middle-class maid and didn't think the little princess would react like that. Sayana said that concubine Angelina would help her overcome a wall that she herself could not overcome due to her low status. And it would also avoid the unpleasant rumors that she had become a middle-class maid by using the young mistress. The girl agreed to let her go only for half a day. In fact, she was very upset because now they wouldn't be able to spend so much time together. And she didn't like it much, but no, she didn't like holding Sayana back any longer. At that moment, 2 new maids approached her and told her that they would definitely stay with Little Miss. And while Miss Sayana becomes a middle-class maid, they will protect Princess Eris. In the castle, Sayana was very happy to have the support of her true friends and her little princess. For her part, she decided to do her best to please the Empress, even if she only helped her a little. Angelina was worried that the LKDI might be restless, as this was an unexpected order. But she was incredibly happy that the noble lady quickly accepted this. She said that the girl must keep the prince's health and education an absolute secret. And if satisfactory results are achieved during this period, she will have to promote the maid Sayana. These were Sayana's conditions for cooperation, and the girl smiled, saying that she thought the lady would probably ask her for a bunch of gems. But Sayana turned out to be much more ambitious than the girl imagined, and the polite maid promised that she would do everything possible to help her son in his development. To explain the prince's condition, it was worth starting from the beginning. And this was the moment when the baby was just born. The baby's father said that the lady who gave birth to her has now become a majestic empress. And he is confident that the Wilhelm family will be as powerful as before. He offered to hand the girl over to an aristocratic nanny so that the girl could focus on taking care of herself. But already in the first days, the maid noticed that something was wrong with the prince, and that the child was behaving strangely. That day, the maid said that the child never makes eye contact or responds to his name. His father understood that if the girl said she should recover outside the palace, the emperor could not stop her. Then he offered to take her and cure her by any means, but Angelina immediately said that she would go too. The man warned that the girl should tell the people in the palace and society that Prince Rise is getting healthier every day and smart, and that the secret that he has some flaws is worth keeping. Then she was sure that her father would raise Rise better than her, but one fine day he did not recognize his son. The girl was indignant that her father could afford to raise a child without her knowledge. The man asked what his daughter was doing there, and without even notifying him of her visit in advance. The man decided to train the child with his own methods, because when people realize at his birthday party that he has some flaws, the future in which he becomes emperor will disappear instantly. And this will be the end of the Wilhelm family, but no matter what he does, the child will do nothing. He doesn't understand and doesn't behave like a normal person. Angelina had no choice but to find another way, so she secretly ran away with her son when her father was away for several days. And then she only thought of one thing: how to save her son from her father's cruelty. Angelina told Siana everything and was sure that she had no right to be called a mother. She informed him that the Marquis said he would return for the prince's birthday. And she knew that Rise was here. Therefore, Siana should help him, and if the prince improves even a little, she will not blame Angelina. But the situation was much more serious than Siana had imagined, and she understood how difficult everything would be. At this moment, her first priority was the child who urgently needed her help. That's why she promised Angelina to do everything possible and help her beloved child to avoid dirty gossip. Angelina said that the prince is very sensitive to everything, but at the same time has a small field of vision. He only focuses on the things in front of him, and what is beyond is the biggest problem. Siana approached the child for the first time, held out her hand, and told him that the weather today was simply beautiful. This little one could not communicate at all, so when he saw the new maid, he stood up and remained silent. Siana remembered that there was such a case in her life too, and that she had already seen a child like this once. Confidently, she told Angelina that her son, Ray, was not sick at all. But in fact, he was born like this, and for him this is his completely normal state. If Anna shared her opinion that this cannot be corrected in any way, and such a diagnosis cannot be treated, as it is not a disease. However, she was sure that his condition could be improved using certain educational methods. It was not easy, but with His Majesty's help, it was very possible to do so. But Angelina understood that she could not ask anyone to help her son. She couldn't believe that now she had to take care of Rise alone, because she had never done it before. Siana said that the prince's help will take a long time, and she will only be able to stay with him for a month. So she must also train someone who will be with the prince for a long time after her. Siana was sure that Angelina was his own mother and not a stranger. Some things take time, so she cannot leave everything as a maid, and only Angelina is capable of helping her son. And no matter how much effort she put in, the most important thing for Angelina was not to give up. Siana said she was sure that the girl would succeed as long as she didn't give up. And give up? The maid's support had a great influence on Angelina's decision, who confidently declared that she would raise her son to be a worthy man. After a while, Angelina opened the door to the nursery, and Siana immediately noticed that the girl was very worried. Reyes was an unusual child and hated irregular things. And he also became defensive when someone touched his things. But he was generally calm. For a long time, Angelina tried to captivate her son with something, but all the toys seemed incredibly boring to him. Rise also didn't like sweets and felt uncomfortable talking to people or children for long periods of time. When Angelina was younger, she loved to draw. The lady grew up among people who said that a young aristocrat should not bother with a brush. So she couldn't freely practice drawing because her father scolded her. Angelina thought she could do this quietly when she got older, but everything went wrong. But when she feels unbearably lonely, she still picks up a brush and paints. And nothing calms her more than drawing peacefully. The lady had no talent for it, but she always had fun drawing, so she tried to show Rise the paintings and the brushes. Unexpectedly for her, the child made a drawing very quickly, and it was impossible to find words to describe it. She saw in front of her an incredible picture with yellow tulips, and she realized that her beloved son was an incredibly talented genius. He was not just a genius, but a global genius, and there was an art in his strokes that indicated that this boy had innate talent. Angelina was truly impressed that the child drew this without any preparation. Moreover, he drew all day without a single break, because he was very focused on this activity. But he never looked at his mother, even though she was by his side the whole time he was drawing. Siana said that if the child didn't like Angelina, he would scream or hide, and the fact that he did nothing only meant that he felt comfortable in her presence. The next day, a very serious incident occurred, and Rise was destroying everything around him with wild screams from the morning itself. Siana asked Angelina to calm down and look closer at the prince, because in this way, he is simply expressing his discontent, and in no way trying to hurt anyone. And really, right now he is a little upset, and the girl should approach her son and hug him. And although this baby didn't understand everything completely, he knew for sure that he had someone close. A person who could tell him kind words and simply come close and hug him. If His Majesty hugged him, Siana was sure the baby would understand, because the lady was his beloved mother. Angelina didn't believe that a simple hug could calm a baby so quickly, and it seemed she didn't understand it at all. Today, Rise even fell asleep early, and must have been tired from being angry for several hours. The lady told Siana that she did a great job today, but how can she go home late? Soon Siana returned home, but the little princess was already angry and said she was going on a picnic with the maids. But she wouldn't take Siana with her, because she was probably tired already. The little princess said that as soon as the lady finished working, she would definitely be with her all day. But for now, she must rest. Tire. The next day, Siana accidentally ran into the crown prince on the estate, who said he could finally see her. The girl asked what the young man wanted to tell her. And then Saul intervened, who insistently asked if Rashid had really come to taste the new tea leaves he had received a few days ago. The crown prince didn't immediately understand what his companion meant, but the young man begged him to just agree. He asked how Rise's classes were going, and only asked why he was really interested. Rashid wondered if the girl could achieve anything in just 2 weeks, when Marquis Wilhelm had failed to achieve it for 10 years. The young man knew that his condition was strange. He couldn't look people in the eyes and talk to them, but he also heard the child screaming like crazy. Although the prince's condition was not yet stable, it was already gradually improving. So Siana was confident that he could laugh and be much healthier in the near future. And she said she was simply sorry and trusted her opinion and her heart. She talked about her brother, her son, and her stepmother having a similar condition, only her situation was much worse. That child didn't even understand any basic speech, unlike the prince. He had no exceptional skills. The reason his condition improved when he was one step away from being sent to a monastery was simply love, and the sincerity of his mother. She was sure that her son would grow up much happier by her side than with anyone else. Therefore, she tried with all her might to protect him from the obstacles of life that presented themselves to him. However, the brother was no longer in this world and was later sacrificed. But the saddest thing is that, in fact, he always liked to bully the innocent Siana and all the maids. Because of this, the maid admitted that the death of her family does not cause her any negative emotions. And in any case, the most important thing now is that Prince Rise's condition is rapidly improving. The young man asked if this would be enough to solemnly present him to everyone on his birthday. For this reason, Siana tried every day to teach the child basic rules of behavior. This path was very difficult, but after a week, she was able to give Angelina a report on her work. And now the child could publicly say on his own that he was the 4th Prince of Rise, and even thank everyone for attending the banquet on the occasion of his birthday. It was a great job, and in fact, before this, the child had no contact with other people. Angelina was very grateful to Siana for her hard work, which was crowned with success. She told the girl that Angelina was doing very well and that the prince was also doing his best. There are only 3 days left before the birthday banquet. In such a short time, a small child certainly cannot become a completely different person, which is why Prince Rise is the way he is. Angelina was too soft a queen and could not stand people's criticism, and the sensitive prince needed her care. Therefore, Siana dared to express her opinion that the banquet should be postponed and moved to next year. But the girl understood that if she didn't show Rise to people, they might not recognize him as a prince, and his father should not know about it. At that moment, a maid ran towards them and shouted breathlessly that Viscount William had just entered the palace. And right now, he is asking for permission to visit the palace and is near the entrance. The man was angry and shouted that the maids dared not stop the queen's father. and they were behaving inappropriately. So he told the young ladies to leave immediately and not see his anger. He shamelessly ran to the child's room and tried to find out from the girl where she had hidden him. Angelina wanted to tell her father everything about how she couldn't leave Ray on the estate. She made an incredible effort to bring him to the palace, and only thanks to the sweet and attentive maid. His condition improved significantly. The man said that he had thought a lot, while he was away from the capital, about what to do if the child did not improve. So he suggested canceling the banquet and saying that he was sick. And if this doesn't work, they will have to come up with another plan to keep the young master secret. The man said that the lady no longer had to worry about the child, because he had found a way to make Rise normal. If they use magic to manipulate people during the banquet, they will be able to distract people's attention from what their son is really like. His words sounded cruel, but he was sure that in the end, that was the only option. He proposed to meet the standard, that people should only be normal during the banquet as a temporary measure. And after that, they could continue training for the prince. But Angelina in no case agreed to do this, and asked her father not to do something so terrible to her son. The man cursed and kept shouting that the lady was talking nonsense and that he didn't want to use magic either. While shouting, he didn't even notice how he entered the child's room and, to his surprise, he saw Rise in front of him, sitting quietly and making a drawing. He burst into the room while Angelina was hugging him and asking him not to do anything to her son. But his father only asked his daughter to leave here immediately and leave his son alone. He grabbed the child by the shoulder and ordered him to follow him, while his mother sat on the floor. And she was completely helpless. Since she was little, she was taught, no matter what, never to irritate her father because he has a peculiar character. Therefore, all his children had to impeccably fulfill their father's will and do everything exactly as he ordered them. Angelina was always taught to be an independent girl in the form of an obedient daughter. So she became an ideal lady just to survive. Since she was little, she held her breath and always kept her mouth shut, spending her days in silence. One day, her father brought a paper and said that he had found an ideal candidate to marry Angelina, and that from now on, she would become the fourth wife of the emperor. To be honest, the girl was very scared and really wanted someone to help her. So now she decided that she would protect her son with all her might anyway. The girl abruptly got up from the floor and shouted at her father to immediately take his hands off Rise, and not even think about taking him away again, because from now on the child would stay with Angelina. The father said that the lady calls herself queen, and that he was probably too soft with her just because she wore a crown. But despite this, she was still his daughter, and the man claimed that Rise was his grandson. He supposedly is only trying to protect the family, and Angelina cannot simply obey, and continues to rebel. But at that moment, security agents rushed into the room and accused the man of attacking the prince and the queen. Angelina did not hesitate much and ordered the criminals' guards to be taken to prison. The man was indignant that everyone would soon find out about this, and she did not dare to imprison Marquis Wilhelm. He continued to convince the guards that everyone was crazy to accept the conditions of this girl, that she would be ashamed now. He instructed that all knights would be punished for this act. Siana approached the cell where the man was imprisoned. The man was sure that the girl would now beg him for forgiveness, but she came to convey His Majesty's words to him. After that, the girl told Angelina that due to the unusual state of the Marquis, she called the guards. They immediately rushed in upon hearing that a strange man was threatening His Highness. For she had seen with her own eyes what was happening, so the Marquis was caught red-handed and placed under temporary arrest. Angelina had to go through a difficult path, but now she was sure that she would never again allow her father to manipulate her, not even for Rise's sake. Siana conveyed Angelina's words, who asked the Marquis never to return to the palace until she allowed it, and said that from now on she would raise Rise alone, so that the man could no longer approach him. The man did not expect to hear such words, and he was beside himself with rage because some maid had done this to him. He was sure that his own daughter shamelessly could not look his father in the eye. and she was dishonoring his honor. Siana said that Angelina was his daughter before, but now she is the empress, and the wife of the most respected person in the empire. And she is also the mother of His Highness, the Crown Prince. And to strike such a person is like raising a sword towards the throne. It was clear to everyone that the Marquis was planning treason and betrayal, and now he had better follow His Majesty's advice. Because this is the last chance for a man. Siana handed him a document, which meant that from now on the man would not visit Her Majesty without permission, and would not interfere in the education of Prince Rise. The man was sure that Angelina was weak and had no talent, so she would never dare to go this far with her father. And probably someone pushed the girl to make this decision. He was sure that the maid was to blame for everything, and she was the one who waited for him to strike Angelina. And he was eagerly awaiting Rise's birthday banquet to see how people would react to this boy who was simply ruining their lives. Siana informed Angelina that Marquis William had left the imperial palace and put his signature on the document. Angelina was very happy that everything had turned out well for them and happily announced that she was now free, and that she would gladly cancel this hated banquet and would no longer have to endure people's stares. And her father's anger, because all she had to be was protect her son. The banquet for Prince Rise, the mysterious prince who had been weak since birth, was cancelled, and he was recovering his health outside the palace. But the reason no one had ever seen him was different, and there were rumors that he was a madman who couldn't speak. These rumors were incredibly disgusting, and the Empress's concubines wondered how Empress Angelina was going to stop them. The longer time passes without explaining anything to the public, the harder it will be to stop the talk. The ladies were informed that since they are the ones who want to help and know nothing about the prince, they have no choice but to ask Angelina about her son, after which they will make a decision. She took the girls to Rise's room, where the boy was painting behind a large canvas. And as they saw, her son was not crazy at all, but just a little special. The concubines said that since Angelina thought so, in that case, there was no need to cancel the banquet and show the child to secular society. Angelina said she would only show him to Rise when he wanted to, and this was the Empress's perfect answer. But the lady was sure that Angelina had also neglected her duties as Empress. And this was no different from the prince denying the right to the throne, so one of the ladies asked if Angelina intended to do so. Angelina was sure that they only wanted to live happily with her son, so she said she was ready to do it and renounce the throne. She only wanted a quiet childhood happiness for her son, so that he would grow up with love and care. Therefore, it is now obvious to the lady that the throne has absolutely no meaning in her life. Each of the concubines perfectly understood what the lady meant and promised that they would take care of the rest. Regardless of Prince Rise's fortune, no one dares to mock the lineage of the great emperor. Angelina thought everything would end quietly, but there were still those who hoped that the girl would never bring her son to society. The gossips discussed the reason why Rise was never introduced, and were sure that Empress Angelina's position was threatened. Siana told her not to worry and was confident that this would not happen, and given the current strength of the situation. The news had definitely reached the emperor, who was recovering. But the fact that Angelina hadn't said anything yet meant that she wasn't worried about it. The maid also reported that the number of services and maids in the imperial palace had not changed, and the amount of gold and jewels that the Marquis sent every month had not decreased, which meant that Angelina's family was still behind His Highness, and all the rumors would soon disappear. Angelina understood Siana was right, and although her father didn't love her, he loved the power of the family. The girl said that thanks to the maid Siana, she received even more than she expected and, therefore, as promised, she will definitely fulfill all her requests. Siana also thanked the lady for her kind attitude and was very happy to be able to help her. The next day, the maid finally returned to the little princess, who ran into her arms as soon as she saw her. The girl really missed her beloved maid, so she offered to spend time together and go on an exciting picnic. This morning, the little one was in a very good mood, and showed Sienna her adorable dress that she was going to wear for the picnic. The maids appreciated the little princess's new dress and excitedly said that Eris looked incredibly cute. They found the picnic spot they had been looking for a long time. It was a small corner of the palace with few people and no managers, so it was incredibly quiet and cozy. During this time, the little princess managed to make friends with two twin maids, and they established a common language. They frolicked happily and played tag, while the little princess diligently fled from everyone. The baby was very agile and loved to run because she needed excitement. But suddenly, she ran into a boy who was sitting, painting on an easel. At the same time, in Rashid Palace, one of the knights said that, judging by the letter sent by the empress, the young man needed time to recover. Almost 6 months have passed since the royal council meeting led by the crown prince, and it is too long for a simple recovery. And it seems that what is happening there completely suits the emperor before his departure. Rashid reported that he found it difficult to do everyday things due to a severe headache. And since he is getting better every day, good news is surely awaiting them soon. The young man suggested going outdoors and said he accepted the information Saul had reported to him. Shiana, who suddenly saw the crown prince in front of her at a picnic, asked why His Highness was here and how he knew about this place. But they were not alone here, and soon Empress Angelina approached them along with her young son. She apologized because her son had not learned imperial etiquette, so she asked the crown prince to understand that he could not greet him properly. The young man asked why the child was looking at him so strangely and didn't understand what was happening at all. Angelina said the baby probably just wants to draw him, and every time he sees something beautiful, he wants to draw it. Eris said that the crown prince also knows how to draw, and that his brother's paintings are simply incredible. The little princess was very interested in seeing the new child, so the lady became interested in the meeting. Angelina approached the girl and asked if this beautiful young lady was the same Princess Eris. Angelina smiled and said this was their first meeting, and it would surely be special for them. The girl looked at the young lady with surprised eyes, and all this time didn't even know what to say to her. If Anna approached the little princess, upon noticing that the girl was a bit nervous in front of the new guests. She said they had gone for a picnic with Princess Eris, but she didn't expect to meet the empress like this. And her son. Eris confusingly asked if this beautiful girl was considered a real empress. Angelina said she was very happy to meet Princess Eris, and that this girl helped her a lot. In the end, it turned out that the empress promoted the maids who served the little princess to the middle rank. And Shiana had actually asked her to do it. The empress said that these girls have very valuable skills and should have moved to this position a long time ago. But if it weren't for Shiana, she would hardly have paid attention to them. The child stared intently at the little princess the whole time and probably looked like he wanted to draw her. Eris was sure that she was the best candidate to have an incredible portrait painted of her right now. The child quickly made a drawing, and it was so lifelike that it seemed as if the scent of delicate roses emanated from it and conveyed all the charm of the little princess. After the child finished the drawing, everyone was amazed by Rise's incredible talent. Siana smiled and said that His Highness the Prince truly has amazing skills. At that moment, Rashid approached them and told them that he would also like to have a beautiful picture of the little one. He looked closely at the child and said he could draw him to see how good he was. Siana noticed that the crown prince seemed to enjoy posing very much, and Rashid reported that he liked doing it. After the child finished with his portrait, he asked Siana to serve him some tea so he could enjoy the incredible drink she had prepared. The young man asked her not to pay too much attention to the painting and asked her to talk a little because simple painting is not that good. Siana took out a pen and invited the young man to try drawing her. Within a few minutes, the young man drew a few lines on the paper that, to his surprise, even looked like a person. And he was sure that the drawing was not for him at all, but he was touched that the beautiful Siana liked the drawing so much. It is always important to remember your strengths, and you can give up what doesn't work. No matter how hard you try, but as a general rule, people are more obsessed with what they don't have, whether it's strength or talent. Therefore, it is better to understand this quickly and be good enough at what you are good at, and not allow yourself to worry about what you're not good enough at. Rashid listened carefully to her words and completely agreed with her opinion that you shouldn't waste time on something you don't like. This was the point. That's why the girl wanted to go from princess to maid, and now she was sure that her life was full of happiness and wonderful moments. For Siana, it was very important to become a maid and find her place in life to be able to live happily. And that's probably why she now lives without regrets and enjoys every moment that happens to her day after day. She cherishes every moment spent with her loved ones, and this is precisely where human happiness lies.